Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here with all of you and share the work that we are doing in Meghalaya and NSFAS. So I'm a senior associate in NSFAS, which is working on indigenous people food system, agrobiodiversity, agroecology, food sovereignty. These are the issues we're working on. Next slide, please. So when you talk about, these are the format which is given to us. So in Meghalaya, only 9% of the area is in the crop. And you see that from there also 6% of the area is in the jhum cultivation. And this figure we got from Niti Aayog, but I don't agree with the figure because if you go to East Khasi Hills in the Niti Aayog report, which just came out recently only, you'll find that East Khasi Hills has no jhum cultivation area. But that's not true because we work on those areas, we know it's not true. So how much the figure can be trusted is, I don't know about that, but we can say that the area under crop is quite huge because we have other farming system out there also. Then you have the major crops, and these I'm getting from the crop cutting experiment, the report which comes out every year from the government of Meghalaya. So they assess how much production is there in the state, and we can divide them into many groups: starchy staples, fruits, nuts, oils and seeds, green vegetables. So when you look at all this, it may seem that there's a lot of thing going on out there, a lot of vegetables, a lot of starchy staples are there. But what this doesn't tell you is that there are a lot of varieties which are found out there. For example, if you go to, let's say, rice, let's say in one village you may have 20 to 40 varieties of rice, which is there in Meghalaya. Maybe if you go to Nagaland, you have 60 varieties of rice in one village. So that they don't tell you exactly the varieties out there. And also food from the forest. Because our indigenous people food system is very much linked to the forest. Like, for example, I would say there are more than 100 food plants in a particular village. So we did the survey, found that if you do agrobiodiversity mapping, 200 food plants can be listed by a community in any village in Meghalaya and Nagaland. Out of that, 100 comes from the forest, which consists of your vegetables, wild green vegetables, you have fruits. So in that sense, it is not telling you the whole picture out here, but you get an idea of how much diversity is there. And that diversity is something that we are working on a lot. You talk about the fertilizer consumption, you will see that compared to the national average, we are very low. And that's why I would like to say that our area under natural farming, organic farming that you call it, we are majority of us are organic farmers by default because we don't use a lot of chemicals out there. Next, please. So when we talk about the policy, in 2014, Meghalaya government decided to stop giving subsidies for pesticides and chemical fertilizers. In 2015, they started the organic mission. Under that, you have the oolong tea, you have the Lycanso tomato, organic tomato, you have Lakhodong turmeric. In fact, the one district, one product scheme actually identified Lakhodong turmeric as being very important for trade and promotion. And in fact, Trinity Sayo, she got the Padam Shri this year, 2021, for her work on Lakhodong turmeric. Now, I was there also in the meeting when they had a meeting with Invest India about Lakhodong turmeric. And the issue I flagged was that you're talking about only one product. It can be a keystone product, but the point is that you're not talking about agrobiodiversity. Because all this has to come through agrobiodiversity, because if you don't, it can lead to monoculture, which is not the thing that we want. So, and then we had a civil society intervention, which is my intervention, my organization. I can't talk about other people. I can talk only about my work. So we're talking on No One Shall Be Left Behind initiative with REC Foundation. So working on agrobiodiversity, nutrition in terms of like micronutrient deficiency. When we did the agrobiodiversity mapping, you found a lot of varieties are there. But when you look in terms of DDS, dietary diversity score, you have all the food groups. You can divide them into 10 groups, and 5 is the minimum you should have. The benchmark, we found that maybe only 3 or 4 is the score we are getting, which means it's very low. So we need to work on that. So we're trying to link our agrobiodiversity with nutrition to improve micronutrient deficiency in the hidden hunger, you call it. And then you also have livelihoods. We're trying to link our livelihood intervention with agrobiodiversity in terms of, for example, our Miramoy Cafe, in terms of, for example, our PGS. So we're not going for organic certification, but PGS, because organic certification takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money. So PGS is more feasible for the people out there. And then we also have innovation, which is mostly about how to improve the well-being of the community. Then positive trend, in fact, that last few years we have been getting a lot of recognition. So the project we're working on right now, we got the 2021 IFAT Indigenous People Award, the project we're working on. And also in the FAO-led publication recently, there was a publication on indigenous people food system and climate resilience. So the work we did got the best award for 2021 World Sustainability Report Award. And this report now is in the Alfred Nobel Museum. And I think this is very important for us because then when we did that, we could actually talk to our policymakers and tell them, see, like, there is merit in indigenous people food system. So therefore, our MLA from Meghalaya, he was from Ribhoi district, so he actually mentioned IFS, Indigenous People Food System, in the Meghalaya Assembly, especially because we did a survey in June 2021 with FAO, showing how do you assess household food insecurity during COVID-19. We found that if we look at the figures, we did 18 villages in Meghalaya and Nagaland, and those villages are basically based on your jhum cultivation. We found that the household food insecurity access scale found that 41% of the communities, households in South Asia were food insecure. But our figure in Meghalaya and Nagaland was only 11%. So it shows that there is a lot of potential in terms of household food insecurity, how to combat that by looking at our indigenous people food system. Please go back. But what are the setbacks? The problem is that Our MP, Vincent Pala, when he's going to COP26 program in Glasgow, he said he'll go to Glasgow and raise the issue of gym cultivation being very bad. We had a press conference about that. We tried to educate him on that because he is a coal miner, coal baron, so how rich for him to talk about our system being bad when he himself is doing extractive industries. And therefore, we also had a national mission on edible oil palm plantation, which is very bad for us because it's a threat to deforestation, it's a threat to loss of agrobiodiversity, that will lead to food insecurity, and also very important is land alienation. Because you look at palm plantation, you need 2 hectares to be viable. In our area, we have small marginal farmers, 1 hectare, 2 hectares. So if you are going to bring that, you're going to have land consolidation, you have a lot of common land being converted into private property, and that's going to lead to land alienation. In fact, 2011 census said that 70% of the households in Meghalaya are landless. I don't agree with the figure, but I think that somewhere the figure is around 30%, something around there. Next, please. Then talk about natural farming. I think our system is by default natural farming. And why I want to show all these food system sources, because let's say you have wet paddy cultivation. Even wet paddy cultivation also is not monocropping, because we have 30 to 40 varieties growing in a single village. And then along with that, you also have many vegetables growing during the fallow period. Then you have wild edibles growing along the edges. Then you have fish, you have aquatic animals, you have many birds, you have trees around the place. So it's not actually monoculture as such. And then you have the jhum cultivation, where you have more than 100 food plants in one single village. If you go to one plot, you have around 20 to 30 food plants. And then, so therefore, and you have bun, which is I would say, an adaptation of jhum cultivation into upland areas where there's less forest vegetation out there. Instead of 1 year in jhum cultivation, you do 3 years jhum cultivation, 3 years of farming, and then you live for 6 years. Then you have homestead garden, which is very common all over the place. You have this backyard garden. And then you have the rivers and foraging. Foraging is very important because from jhum cultivation, from all the areas, people go and collect forest products. And these are NTFP, which are for food. So you have around 100 food plants on an average from every village, bud from forest, mushrooms, fruits, and wild green leafy vegetables. And many of these wild green leafy vegetables are found very high in micronutrient. Like for example, we have the Kleng Siar, which is like Centralia asiatica, which has very high iron content compared to what you get from the market. And therefore, what we see is that in one village, people may have more than 3 or 4 food sources, which is very important because agrobiodiversity, diversity of land use system is very important to bring about resilience to climate change. Next, please. What is the problem? Problem is that when you see about the ODP also, we see that people are focusing on one crop, but not the system itself, which is the agrobiodiversity system. And therefore, this comment I had made, so we need to link our marketing in terms of agrobiodiversity, which means that if I'm going to buy, it's not just it is organic, but it's also produced in a system where there is more diversity around it. Then you have support coming for conversion because people want to convert to it, but then 3 years, 4 years time is there, government hasn't really given them support for that. Then loss of agrobiodiversity because of well-meaning intention. For example, PDS system also is there. In the past, we used to have a lot of millet, but once the PDS system came in, then people started growing less of millet and they started growing more of potato and other stuff, which is seed coming from the government department. And competition of food from outside, because outside they're producing with agrochemicals, so they have a lot of quantity, a lot of quantum going on, but we are very small producers, so can't really compete with that. Then threat of imposition of monoculture policies, like the Indian government imposing the palm plantation area. Of course, our chief minister hasn't agreed to that, but we never know what might happen with that. And also extractive industries from inside, like our MP, who is a coal baron. You have limestone mining, coal mining, you have other quarrying activities. That's a threat because that leads to land use conversion. And lastly, it's climate change. I think climate change is very important. We already are seeing the effects of climate change in Meghalaya. We had heavy rainfall last year, this year, little less rainfall, and there were a lot of incidents of pests in paddy cultivation. So, but at the same time, I would say that climate change also is a solution, is a scope for us to our adaptation, because if you talk in terms of adaptation to climate change, talking about genetic diversity, you have more genetic diversity, which means that you have more options to actually adapt to climate change, and that can be lost if agrobiodiversity is lost. So it's a threat, but also has potential for our solution for that. That's all. Thank you.